Just for the last few years, I have been harried by a vocal subset of this lore's fandom. I hear the constant cries of more Shaxx on a daily basis, sometimes more than. It will be stuck in my brain to last a lifetime. So on this day, as we approach Valentine's Day and someone's birthday is happening as I make this, well, let's just talk about all the things Mara Sov and Shaxx so I can stop getting asked about it already. Heck, who am I kidding? I'll still get asked about it for more Shaxx content. I'm not mad, I promise. In fact, I think it's kind of cute. Of course, Mara and Shaxx aren't the only ones we could talk about. Hey everybody, it's your buddy Beard Grizzly, and I was actually reminded a little bit ago that I made a Valentine's Day episode last year, but this year we've got so many new things that we could actually talk about, and I figure, why not? There's actually a lot of little fun bits that we can actually talk about, but I don't want to mess around on this too long, so moving on. I will say that the Black Armory series is ready to go, but I do have to produce it. I'm spending time with this since, well, Valentine's Day is around the corner, and we had the Crimson Days trailer go live, and in it, an image of Shaxx and Mara. Though it seemed more like wishful thinking than much else and a little bit of a bad Photoshop job, but let me explain it all, however, and for those not sure what's happening, well, here we go. I have to give a member of the community a bit of praise for thinking of this way ahead of time. They were screaming about Marax and the fandom they're in for quite some time before we got confirmation of everything happening, even if it's a bit one-sided at the end of the day. Anyway, it's been a very weird few years for me of doing all this and hearing it all the time, but it's absolutely impossible for me to not bring them up a little bit, and they know who they are. Happy birthday. Our story begins with the entry from the Recluse. This one talks about the time that Shaxx and Sjur met each other, the Queen's Wrath of Mara Sov, and the first time they both met was with Sjur killing Shaxx with Wishender. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe how tall she was, how big the bow was, and the fact that he got killed by someone with just a bow and the impossible strength that they wielded. But from there, it was the start of a beautiful friendship. This could very well be where Sjur introduced Shaxx to Mara, especially since Shaxx was, well, going where he shouldn't be going, into Awoken territory. He had reasons to go ahead and brave it. He knew what was coming with the Fallen, but of course that's speculatory. We don't know the full story. After this moment seems to be a bit of a blank for all of us. That is, until a point after the Reef Wars with that entry. The Mark of the Great Hunt is a fun little entry, but read it again and you'll find that it's full of memes. Mara Sov shooting a wall in order to summon Shaxx is, at first, a bit weird and funny. It could also be Wish 15 for all we know, just to make some people mad, but it's also kind of cute, especially when she hands him a book which we find is The Tempest by William Shakespeare, which to my knowledge is a very dry read. I don't know, I can think of other intellectual romantic evenings I might have over that one if you ask me. Anyway, we have more to talk about in this entry, don't we? There's also a very famous meme that came of this community and was produced by a member of this community, with the Shaxx coffee meme hinted as well, as Shaxx appears with Mara and has a cup of coffee in his hand. This is also where we get the overused punchline, "The helmet stayed on." Now, besides some giggles and cringe that now accompany this phrase, it's led to amazingly high speculation. I mean, why do they have to express that the helmet stayed on? Did other stuff come off? Oh boy, the speculation ran high with this piece, and of course, understandable why. There is one thing that makes most of this believable, however. I told you there would come a time when I collect for the Reef Wars, said Mara Sov. This could imply that the Reef Wars, the time when the Awoken and Fallen had been at odds before the House of Wolves were subdued by Verix, now, could have been a plea from Shaxx at some point or something just to help save the city, especially with it budding. Sketchy at best, you know. The thing is, at GuardianCon not too long ago, we had information that was given to us that this entry was a meme, and it wasn't to be taken seriously. It was Riven looking outside of the game itself, which is, well, becoming more commonplace, a story mechanic, I think. But I've talked about that enough for now. Unfortunately, that's a little hard to believe, however, with another entry entitled Say It With a Dawning Gift from the book Dawning Delights, which backs up the entirety of the Mark of the Great Hunt entry. Here, we see Eva talk about a famous titan, codenamed Torito. Now, there's some wrestling history here with El Torito, but the loose definition is Little Bull from Spanish. Different dialects would differ, but I think it goes along with what we're talking about here today, yeah, especially with Shaxx. Most other definitions follow with a horned something or other, and we know who's got a horn on their helmet. Here we see Torito carrying a bow, wrapped up with a bow on top, or wherever. There's a bow on a bow, that's the punchline. He's asking if this would be a good gift for someone on the Dawning. In this entry, he goes on to mention how a book could be a gift, since he burned one of those up the last time he and his crush met. Eva thinks it a bad idea to bring up bad memories. Also, please don't burn books, Shaxx. Thanks. He also mentions that this person is regal, and asks if a recurve or compound bow would be a better gift. More of a dumb side note here than anything else, but the Awoken value close-range combat over most other forms, thanks to venturing through the destroyed hulls of colony ships and waste material in our system. They value a sidearm more than a heavy cannon, and while compound bows don't necessarily have to be long, they can tend to be cumbersome. Recurves can be smaller and a bit easier to wield in tighter spaces, while still having additional energy and power thanks to their design. There, some weapons history for you if nothing else. But the story doesn't seem to have a happy ending. The entry from The Vow, the Bow of Crimson Days, shows a Shaxx that is beside himself with something. His mood is a bit low, contemplative. He stares out at the city and gives a sigh. Someone that's been in love and not had the feelings reciprocated, I can relate to Shaxx in this way, if that's the intended purpose of this entry anyway. But what Shaxx does, well, that's the thing that matters and speaks to his character, almost to a T. He claims he'll marry them all. He takes his feelings, his passions, and his want to get back to work, which is the Crucible, and he presents Crimson Days to us, to the Guardians that he helps train, in renewed fashion. This action speaks so well of the passion that Shaxx has for his work. It shows he has feelings that aren't always being shouted and screamed. He can think on something for the benefit of others, even when he himself isn't feeling the greatest. But the whole event should speak just as much for Mara Sov, in the things that aren't said and written. Of course, you wouldn't think of that connection so easily, I suppose. Then again, I kind of think out of the box too much, so take whatever I say with a grain of salt anyway. Mara is a strong character within Destiny. She holds her secrets close to her, just as the Awoken always do. She keeps hidden the scars of her life from those that aren't very close to her. Uldren knew of the love she had. Does Petra? Varix? Any of the Awoken paladins that served with her at all? Sjur Ido, once the original Queen's Wrath, and a title that Mara holds close to her heart because of the woman at the helm of it all. Sjur and Mara Sov were the pair we knew of previously. She originally wanted to kill Mara in the Distributary where the Awoken all came from, but she grew to care for Mara after losing the hunt to Uldren. She became a steadfast friend, and it seems much, much more. In the book, Awoken of the Reef, we see within the entry Telic 2 that Sjur is willing to worship Mara Sov as a god among the Awoken, but Mara stops her. Sjur, Mara says, falling to her knees, clutching her beloved's face between shaking hands. Sjur, on the day you worship me, you cannot love me anymore, for to worship is to yield all power, and I cannot love what has no power over me. There's several other points that we could reference, but I find this one funny, considering. You're the devil, Sjur says. You're the lone power who made death. You allowed the possibility of evil. You might be responsible for more preventable suffering than anything that has ever existed. Mara cannot shake her head or even nod. Well, Sjur says, if you hadn't, none of us would be here. I guess I don't see what else you could have done if you cared about those we left behind. If you wanted us to be able to go back and help in the fight. She leans forward and very gently kisses the inside of her helmet where it meets Mara's. In her mind, in that place that is bound to all other awoken, Mara feels the touch of gentle lips. Mara's got a thing for helmets, I guess. I don't know. But seriously, I hope these couple pieces show reasoning for why Sjur is very important to Mara. I know these are only a couple, but I can't help but think that Sjur wouldn't want Mara to be happy even if she's gone now. The statue in the Shattered Throne? Mara clearly still cares for Sjur. The trouble is, like that of what we saw with Shaxx prior, it seems Mara is very devoted to what she needs to do. Both her and Sjur fall apart within the Telic 2 entry, as Mara needs to twist and change as the awoken people need to stay alive within this new system. It's just duty for her. This does not mean that Sjur and Mara are no less close or care any less for each other. Other matters needed attending. In fact, that duty could have gone much further with the entry entitled Debt from the book Ecstasiate. This is where Sjur dies, and where Orin is called on by Mara Sov to hunt down what happened. Mara makes it very clear, however, this may not have been a murder. What could have caused her to be so willing to give up her life, her partially immortal life? For me, the one answer that I can think of is duty, either to a queen or her lover. And I'm sure that Sjur, looking back on this entry or others, would have wanted Mara to be happy, no matter what that would entail. And I can't see it as any different for the instance of Shaxx and Mara as well. Even after she came back to us within Forsaken's entries, I'm sure Shaxx saw this as an opportunity to say hello and possibly spend more time with someone he hadn't seen for some time. He was giving her a dawning gift, after all, and that is a time where new beginnings can happen, and a time where gifts and friendships can blossom and bloom. We don't know the full stories of these two at all, just as we lack information on Sjur and Mara. Granted, there's much more there on the two of them than on Shaxx and Mara, I would say, since most of this information is tentative as it is. Just to round this out, it shows how possibly dedicated Mara is to Sjur, regardless of it all. The Awoken themselves have issue with population imbalance, as women outnumber men almost 4-1. Of course, this number could be much less offset like it was in the early days of the Awoken, but, well, I might leave it there. I'm sure cultural change would alter how mingling may have been among the Awoken, and who knows if that cultural impact carried through back to our system as well. But for me, regardless of what's happened, regardless of how this tale goes, regardless the love stories that are here, the story that has entwined all of these characters reminds me just how fragile and cherished something like love can be in a time of war among those with duty held much higher. In the end, they may not be as happy. It may not be quite what they hoped, but it helps those in the long run besides, just to have a little bit of, comfort. To me, with the Tales of Destiny, it just helps to amplify the storytelling, especially with the other stories that we have. And in case you're interested in hunting more of those love stories down, then here's a list. They're actually pretty plentiful. I don't think this is all of them, but they're the ones I remember the most. Wei Ning and Ariana III, The Tragic Tale of Luna. Maya Sundaresh and Chioma Essie, the original Vex researchers. 227 copies of each were made. Cade and the Queen of Hearts. His son, Ace, wouldn't be around otherwise. Right. Anna and Cameron. A tale of finding a cure and a past. Devrim K and Mark. Because we all know Devrim just misses his mark. Also a tale of childhood upbringing with Soraya Hawthorne. I know these tales are out there and you can find them. There are others with less obvious connotations, but to me, these are just some of the important ones. We've covered everything about Shaxx and Mara for the time being as well, or at least the concrete stuff. But there is mounds of extra information out there for Sjur and Mara. Their tale doesn't end here. Not even close. Anyway, before I carry on much longer, just be good to each other. I'm happy to have as welcoming a community as I do at Destiny, and right here, especially. If you'd like to be a part of these discussions later, then you know the buttons to press, along with how you enjoyed this piece as well. To all of you, no matter when or where you are, I'll see you next space time. Take care.